The breaking news this morning, we are witnessing the rapid destruction of the market. Stock futures are plunging this morning once again as the turmoil from President Trump's trade war is rocking markets here in the United States and around the world. Donald Trump's baseline 10% tariff across the board, it went into effect Saturday. And also so many countries are bracing for more as the targeted tariffs that he announced are set to kick in Wednesday. So far today, Hong Kong's main exchange dropped 13%. Taiwan's exchange saw its biggest one-day loss on record. And the S&P is now nearing a bear market defined as a drop of 20% or more from a recent peak. Add to that, billionaire hedge fund manager and Donald Trump supporter Bill Ackman is now somewhat leading Wall Street's backlash to the tariffs, calling Trump's tariff plan a, quote, self-induced economic nuclear winter. Also saying this is not what we voted for. Facing all of this brutal reality, the president and his team are offering mixed messages on a key question in all of this, which is the president willing to negotiate, or are these tariffs here to stay? Here was the president last night on the way back to Washington.
Now, I'm willing to deal with China, but they have to solve their surplus. We have a tremendous deficit problem with China. I do want to solve the deficit problem that we have with China, with the European Union and other nations. And they're going to have to do that. And if they want to talk about that, I'm open to talking.
On TV.
CNN's Matt Egan starting us off for what is going to be another rocky day. But what's happened already?
Well, Kate, look, fear continues to dominate financial markets around the world. And make no mistake, this is all about the president's decision to launch a trade war. Now, this is how bad things are. Futures are down 2%. This is actually good news. This is an improvement because overnight we saw Dow futures were down 4% or so, about 1,500 points. You mentioned the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. This was the worst day for the Hang Seng since 1997 when Asian markets were in complete crisis mode, right? And so this is an indication, though, that futures are going to open with the S&P trading just above what would be a bear market, right, which is that 20% decline. Just for some context here, if the S&P closed in a bear market today, this would be the second fastest bear market in history, second only to 2020 during COVID and surpassing the 1987 crash. Look at this. So this is the S&P 500 so far this year. You can see things were getting a little bit rocky in February and March, and then Liberation Day came last week when the president rolled out his tariffs, and look at this. It's gone basically straight down since then. The S&P 500 lost over $5 trillion in value after Liberation Day. Look at this complete wipeout. And you mentioned, Kate, that we are starting to hear from some notable billionaires speaking out. Bill Ackman, who endorsed Trump and has been a very outspoken supporter of elements of the Trump agenda. He is basically pleading with the president to change course. He put out this tweet last night. He said that the president...
It was a lengthy statement, yes.
It was. Most of his are. But he said that the president has an opportunity on Monday to call a timeout and have the time to execute on fixing an unfair tariff system. He said, alternatively, we are heading for a self-induced economic nuclear winter, and we should start hunkering down. And Kate, we may find out in the next few hours whether or not the president is going to heed these calls.
I mean, according to his team, they're coming. This 90-day pause that he's asking for, there's no sign of it yet. Stand by to stand by. And you have some context also just putting the beginning of the Trump administration into historical context in terms of the market.
Yeah, it's been atrocious, right? So the S&P 500, since the president was sworn in, has lost 15% of its value. This is the worst start to any presidential term since the S&P 500 launched back in the 1950s. And again, this is being driven by recession fears. We heard Goldman Sachs overnight came out and they bumped up their recession odds. They now say a 45% chance of a recession, although they said it would go even higher if the tariffs kick in.
So guys, I mean, this morning, it's the real fallout and the ripple effects that keep on rippling from the markets. And then there's the political impact of it, which is a real big question mark right now. Markets, and then this, I don't know if this is an inkling of what is to come in terms of political impact, Mark, but you now have Wall Street titans weighing in, like billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman. He supported Donald Trump in the election, and he's now somewhat leading the way of Wall Street's pushback on these tariffs. He put out a lengthy social media post in part saying, "This is not what we voted for, and we are headed for a self-induced economic nuclear winter, and we should start hunkering down now." Do you think, if nothing else, that changes minds at the White House?
Well, it's interesting that he is relaying his concerns via X, right? You know, as opposed to picking up the telephone, and maybe he did, and called President Trump. But the reality is that this is how people are communicating with him. This is how they get Donald Trump to move a certain way. Ackman is now up again, putting out more messages. Last night, he criticized Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, saying that Lutnick's firm benefited financially off of the economy imploding. This morning, he's now taken that back and said, listen, I'm just really frustrated about what's happening. We've made such great economic gains. But as you talk about apprehension and frustration and, you know, us looking at our 401ks, the likes of Bill Ackman are looking at their portfolio collapse.
Margaret, one of the things I'm noticing the trend now is a couple of the ways that President Trump is talking about it, right? On Saturday, he put out a Truth Social post saying, "Hang tough, it won't be easy, but the end result will be historic." On the plane back on Air Force One last night, he'd said, "Sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something," with the administration, of course, continuing to, you know, send mixed signals on what exactly that means. What do you think of that message from the President of the United States?
You know, Kate, it's interesting. My colleagues, Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen, wrote this morning, and I actually think it's the right framing for it, that usually you think of President Trump as trying to make a deal, and in this case, he's trying to make a point. So he's trying a series of different messaging that suggests that he intends to dig in and that he's just trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. Can he play golf and show everyone if he is not worried they shouldn't be either? Is he telling everybody this is going to hurt for a while, but it's going to get better? Is he going to use a medicine analogy, which is interesting for a person who says everybody should has the right to decide whether or not they want to take the medicine? So I think he's trying a lot of different messaging here, but it's because of the pushback that he's getting, not just from the markets, but as you mentioned, from Wall Street. We saw this morning Jamie Dimon, the CEO for JP Morgan, warning in his letter to shareholders that he believes these tariffs are going to significantly slow the U.S. economy, which already is facing pressure and weaken, and that it could drive inflation. You've got AEI, the conservative think tank, over the weekend putting out, you remember that formula that the White House released to explain the rationale for the tariffs, putting out a statement saying that actually the formula is wrong, that they used the wrong variable for import prices, and that it will create something like a 4-to-1 ratio in how bad we'll feel the tariffs. So if the president truly intends to dig in, he is going to need a series of different messaging tests to see what can assuage different parts of the U.S. Some will be regular Americans who have very little extra money to cushion the blow of this, and some of this will be multimillionaires and billionaires who just don't like it.
Yeah, and so then, Mark, the question, one of the things, a factoid that Matt Egan actually told us this morning, which is something that Trump pre-being committed to tariffs in this way would care a lot about, which is that this is the worst start to any presidential term since the S&P 500 launched in the 1950s. And then it's, what is Congress's role here? Here's how Punchbowl put it this morning. Senate and House Republicans are beginning to panic, although A, we don't think that Congress will pass a bill to take tariff power away from the president, and B, it's an open question as to whether the Hill can have any influence at all with the president on trade policy. It's an interesting moment for Senate and House Republicans. I mean, in Congress in general, which typically has the power, has tariff authority. What do you see happening on the Hill?
Well, this is when this is the problem about giving too much power to the executive, right? Because the Republicans are in control of the House, are in control of the Senate, but they've ceded all authority to President Trump so far in just about everything. So when they feel like they have to step up, it only makes it more difficult for them to do so. However, if we are to believe the likes of Howard Lutnick and Peter Navarro yesterday on the show, saying that basically these tariffs are here for, a pretty long time, and, it's not going to be changed overnight. That means that you're going to see members of Congress going home every weekend now into the summer, and they're going to have to listen to their constituents. And that's when all of this blows up for Donald Trump. It doesn't just affect his ability to get, anything through regarding the tariffs. It could affect his ability on getting anything through at that point, because then these members of Congress, these Republicans who are in some very difficult races, it's every man for himself, every woman for herself. So they're going to have to do what they have to do to make sure that they get reelected. And that may not be supporting Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, you can put money on the fact that it's going to hurt those members of Congress first before, obviously, it would hurt Donald Trump if you carry on the tradition of what we've seen, which is, Teflon Trump for so many years. That's going to be quite a dynamic.